Super Bowl 60 has the potential of being a great game. We've got fresh faces and hungry fan bases ready for a Super Bowl matchup that played just over a decade ago. Let's talk Patriots versus Seahawks in Santa Clara.
From the gridiron to the hardwood, James Mesh breaks it all down. It's time for another episode of Cleats and Sneaks.
Super Bowl 60 is right around the corner. We've got New England Patriots, Seattle Seahawks in a battle for Super Bowl 60 of who's going to host the Vince Lombardi Trophy. I think these are two great teams. I'm really excited to see how this goes down because, like I said in the intro, I think this is a game that has the potential of being one of the better Super Bowls, even in recent history, because we've had some really good games. Back in the past, we had a lot of blowouts. Not too many competitive games. But as of late, it's definitely gotten better. We've had some crazy comebacks. We've had a lot of big-time moments that came down in the final minutes. I think this is another one of those games that we could see on Sunday because these are two really good, really well-coached teams that don't have too many flaws. But in this episode of Cleats and Sneaks, I want to go over some of the 5 biggest aspects that I have about Super Bowl 60, and I want to share those with you today. To address one of them, I actually had to scratch one of them off and replace it because initially I thought that the injuries with these quarterbacks was going to be a factor that maybe could put a hamper on this game. But as of late, what we've seen with the injuries with Sam Darnold and Drake May, I actually don't think that's going to be a factor anymore. Initially, we thought the oblique was going to be an issue and maybe even take out the Seattle Seahawks from even being in the Super Bowl. But as we've seen from the last couple of weeks with Sam Darnold against the 49ers and against the Los Angeles Rams, 2 division opponents, both rubber matches in the playoffs for Seattle, not much of an issue for him. So even though it was something that popped up kind of last minute going into the playoffs and was a little bit of a scare for sure, that's really been nothing to be the case. It's almost forgotten at this point. So that's not a factor for Seattle. That's nothing to worry about. But we did have the concern with Drake May because he did injure his shoulder not too long ago. It happened within the Texans game and also felt like it played a factor for sure in the Patriots-Broncos game in the AFC Championship in Denver. But the fact that they've had 2 weeks off and had the extra rest, hearing from Drake May going into the week of the Super Bowl for media availability, he kind of did a little shoulder check thing. Is like, I feel fine. I'm not worried about being limited in any way with the shoulder injury. So at this point in time, with the oblique with Sam Darnold and the shoulder with Drake May, both of those guys seem about as healthy as you can be. And I wasn't worried about the availability of them going into this game, but I thought it could play a factor, especially on Drake May's side. But at this point, with the way he acted and the way he's answering questions about the injury, he seems to be pretty confident that injury is probably behind him at this point. So now that that is out the way, let's get into the 5 things that really stand out to me, the 5 biggest angles of Super Bowl 60. For number 1, it's really the quarterback's best friend, and that, of course, is the run game. I think both of these run games are pretty intriguing and are going to play a huge factor going into this game. Sure, we're worried about the quarterbacks. We always talk about the quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, we've got the resurgence of his career. That's, of course, going to be a big-time story throughout Sunday's game. And then you also have second-year quarterback Drake May, who is at minimum going to be the runner-up of the MVP, and we'll find out about who actually wins the MVP in just a couple of days right before the Super Bowl. But those are 2 big things. However, the run game is, to me, what's going to be the big difference maker of who's going to have the stronger edge of who's actually should win this game. With the Seahawks, Kenneth Walker, I've been pretty up and down with him throughout the years. The injuries do play a factor for him as well because with how hard he runs, he's definitely kind of taken himself out of some games when he probably shouldn't take unnecessary risks. And I think that's what's kind of plagued him throughout his career. But as of right now, he's healthy. There's no injury concern with him at all. And if you've watched how he's played the last couple of games, huge reason why it was a blowout against San Francisco, and also had another 100-yard performance against the Los Angeles Rams in the NFC Championship game as well. The Seattle offensive line is a little bit better in the pass game than it is the run game. But now with Zach Charbonnet not being on the field because of his injury that he sustained in the playoffs, it's all Kenneth Walker. They're going to get George Halani the ball a little bit here and there, but to me, watching what Kenneth Walker can do with this offensive line and with this new scheme, he's really started to figure out and gotten a lot more comfortable as we've gotten into the latter half of the regular season and with the 2 playoff games that they have played leading into this game that we have on Sunday. I expect Kenneth Walker to not only be a huge factor in the run game, but also be a part of the receiving game. We've seen a couple times offensive coordinator, soon to be probably head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, Clint Kubiak. He's made sure to give him the ball, including in wide receiver screens as well. So he's somebody that you got to watch out for, because as soon as you get him the ball in open space, with how hard he runs and how physical he is, it's going to be a tough time for some of those linebackers and defensive linemen to make tackles against him. Do I expect him to go for 200 yards of scrimmage? Not necessarily, but I do expect him to get a big bulk of touches. Like, I could see north of 30 for Kenneth Walker on Seattle's side with how that offense runs, and trying to not put too much attention and put everything on Sam Darnold, even though he has played and probably did play the best he's ever played in his NFL career, going back to that NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, when it comes to New England's side, we thought that we were going to see Travion Henderson just be a rookie phenom going into the season, but he's had some struggles. He's definitely hit that rookie wall, and he hasn't necessarily earned the trust in the playoffs of Mike Vrabel and company. However, it's the veteran, Ramondre Stevenson, who's the guy that really stands out to me. When it comes to what he did in Denver, that was a huge one. The stats will not pop off to you, and you wouldn't be amazed at what he did, but he got the tough yardage. He put them in opportune situations to where you're not being stuck in third and long and third and forever and second forever when you're in a snowstorm, as New England and Denver had to deal with in the second half of the AFC Championship game. He's a guy that's had fumbles in the past, but with the concern of what's been going on as of late, with how good that Seattle defense is, and we'll get into that in just a minute, making sure that you give a good amount of touches towards Ramondre Stevenson will not put too much pressure on your second-year quarterback that will have to go against some of that defensive line like Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and DeMarcus Lawrence and others, because if you've seen any as of late of New England's offense, that offensive line, it has not been good. And Drake May's been sacked a lot. So to me, to keep off that pressure and to make sure that that does not become an issue to where Drake May is fumbling the ball a bunch and Seattle's falling on it for turnovers to create extra opportunities for points, you've got to be able to run the ball. And I think the way that Ramondre Stevenson has been used throughout these playoffs, in all 3 playoff games, he is absolutely crucial if New England wants to have a chance in upsetting Seattle in the Super Bowl. Now, when it comes to the defenses, these are both pretty interesting because neither of them are weaknesses by any stretch of the imagination, which makes me believe this is kind of going to be more of a middle tier scoring game. I don't think either team's necessarily going to get into the 30s unless we get a bunch of turnovers and maybe even one of them gets returned for a touchdown itself. But with it, getting some extra opportunities here and there and getting a bunch of stops, I could see this being in the mid-20s. And that's because you got a lot of playmakers for both teams. When you look at Seattle side, as I was just talking about, you've got Byron Murphy, DeMarcus Lawrence, you've got Leonard Williams, all on the defensive line alone. And between those 3 guys, you had 22 sacks, 7, and 6 apiece between the 3 of them. Plus you got Ernest Jones, who has been a really underrated linebacker throughout his career. No one really talks about it, but the fact that he's kind of been somewhat of a journeyman going from Los Angeles, having to be traded to Tennessee, and then now has made his way to Seattle. He's been productive at every place he's been, so he's that type of guy that can be a huge difference maker, especially at that second level. That defensive line for Seattle should have plenty of opportunities with the struggles of Will Campbell and other offensive linemen for New England to get to Drake May. That should create extra opportunities to create some turnovers, whether it's creating strip sacks or maybe you bat a ball up in the air and all of a sudden someone in the secondary ends up getting an interception. I think that's very easily could be the case for them and could be the difference maker of how we get to a Seattle win. Now, when it comes to New England on the other side, they're not a bunch of scrubs either. Those guys are really good. And it's not like they have any real headliners outside of Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez is one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL by far. And whenever he has the opportunity to go against JSN, that's going to be an epic battle to watch, because I love watching wide receiver cornerback battles. Those are one of my favorites, since wide receiver is the position that I played when I did play football, and just overall my favorite position, watching them day in and day out and watching them for football games. Christian Gonzalez, the mainstay, the headliner for the Patriots defense, and whoever he's going to be lining up against, whether it's Jackson Smith and Jigba or Cooper Kupp, or they throw Rashid Shaheed out there. However it goes, to me, I would believe they want to put extra attention on the other side. You want to be able to leave him on an island. Let Christian Gonzalez do whatever he needs to do and try to shut down whoever he's lined up against. Give the extra attention towards some of the other guys, especially when you have the JSN and Christian Gonzalez matchup. But with Rashid Shaheed, you got to have that extra attention. You got some good linebackers, Christian Ellis. You've got others, especially in the defensive line. The big addition that they had made in the offseason and free agency was getting Milton Williams. They had to shore up that interior of the defensive line and make sure that they got better at stopping the run. And they absolutely did so by getting the former Philadelphia Eagle in Milton Williams and got him on a huge contract. But so far, it has been very much worth it. And the thing is, they don't necessarily have a whole lot of headliners on the defensive line. I would say Seattle's defensive line, you got more name recognition, but you got other guys like Caleb Chason or Chasson. I would believe it's Chasson, but everybody says Chason with him. But still, nevertheless, got a lot of guys on that side of the ball as well that can make some big-time plays for you. So even though we probably recognize Seattle's defense as better, with how opportunistic at times New England's defense has been, that could be very much a case and something that we should look out for, because outside of these last couple of games, if you go back throughout Sam Darnold's career, he has been a turnover machine and has thrown a lot of interceptions. I think he's been better at that throughout the season, and a lot of the mistakes that he's made has kind of come later on in a play where you're just making it up on the fly and trying to escape it out of the pocket to see if you can find a receiver down the field. But with this game, I do think both of these defenses absolutely have opportunities to create turnovers. It's very easily been the case. And I think an underrated guy to look out for in this game is Nick Eamon-Warry. He's a guy that stood out to me in his rookie year. I know going into the draft, he was somebody that you absolutely had to look out for and stood out on the page because he's a safety coming out of South Carolina. But you look at his measurables, and a lot of people fall in love with measurables, but it's hard not to when you're looking at a 6'3 safety that is 220 or so and is versatile, being able to play at safety over the top, and you could even throw him in the box. And as we see with Seattle, is in their nickel packages and kind of has Seattle predominantly playing in nickel and not necessarily in a 4-3 base defense. So I really like a lot of the key playmakers on both sides for defenses, for Seattle, for New England, and I could very easily see this being some big-time plays coming from that side of the ball that could swing it in their team's favor. Now, one thing that definitely could decide and probably will decide how this game ends up being is what are the play calls in some of these key moments. Fourth down, are you going to kick a field goal or are you going to go for it? Are you going to run a fake punt? How are you going to make your calls on these key third downs? And if it's a fourth and short, depending on where you're at on the field, are you going to decide to punt the ball, rely on your special teams to play position game, or even try to get a free 3 points? Or are you going to go out there and try to win it right then and there? I think what's pretty interesting is seeing Clint Kubiak's play calling and having Mike McDonald kind of take over and be the head man to decide whether they want to do so or not. And same thing with Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniel on New England side. We've seen both of them be very aggressive at times. And usually the team that kind of is more in the middle tier, not necessarily too aggressive, but also not necessarily too passive. They kind of have those kind of moments where you're looking for a moment in time to actually pick and choose when you want to be aggressive. Not necessarily just always go and be aggressive based on what the analytics say. The thing is, both of these teams can be very aggressive at times, and we've seen them go for it on fourth downs throughout these playoffs. So I do wonder, with how this plays out, with some of these fourth down calls and these third down calls to set up fourth down if they don't pick up the first down, Vrabel and Mike McDonald, it feels like the way that we critique these coaches and the decisions that they make, if they are not successful on the aggressive attempts that they go on third and fourth down, that's something that's probably going to play a factor once it's all said and done in this Super Bowl, and we're going to be like, so-and-so won because the other team decided to be too aggressive in a late moment game and decided to pass up points on a field goal, or decided to be too aggressive to try and extend the drive when they very easily could have just punted the ball away and played the position game of where they want to be on the field. That's something to definitely look out for, because yes, fortune favors the bold, but at times being too aggressive can bite you in the ass. Another angle about this game that is interesting to me personally, but probably won't make too much of a difference, but is definitely a storyline going into this game, is Super Bowl experience. Does a team necessarily have to have more experience with players going to more Super Bowls than the other team to win the game? Absolutely not. But that week of preparation, having that extra week off, going into the big game, the Super Bowl, what everybody suits up to play for, it's a little bit different. And this being maybe your second or third or fourth go around is a lot easier to digest and go into the big game compared to it being your first. So Super Bowl experience, especially having at least some guys on the roster that have been there before, that's invaluable. That's a huge thing for teams and helps them kind of take that next step forward. And you may be wondering, okay, well, who is really a lot of the main players that have been to previous Super Bowls and who has more? Well, looking and starting with Seattle, they've got two players. One of them, I think you could guess, that's Cooper Kupp, who helped the Los Angeles Rams win the Super Bowl just a handful of years ago. He definitely got it done and had a huge game himself. The other player was Sam Darnold, who was a backup for the 49ers just a couple of years ago. So both of those guys pretty recently, and it matters. Now, the thing is with Sam, because he was the backup, he didn't get on the field, so he didn't play, but he still has the experience of getting ready with the team, preparing the week of the Super Bowl, and then eventually kind of experiencing and getting a grasp and the feel and the vibe of what a Super Bowl really is all about. For the Patriots, though, I got 5 for you. I've got Milton Williams, who was in the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl last year with the Philadelphia Eagles in that blowout win over the Chiefs in the Caesar Superdome. You've also got Carlton Davis, who was a part of that 2020 Super Bowl run with Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Austin Hooper. Now, Austin Hooper, older at this point, is the backup tight end for the New England Patriots. He was with the Atlanta Falcons in that 2016 Super Bowl when the Patriots came back against Atlanta and won 28-3. You've got Mac Hollins, who was a part of that 2017 Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl team when they beat the New England Patriots. And then you also have Christian Ellis, who, yet another former Eagle, but he was a part of that 2022 team when the Eagles lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's not like it's a huge sample size, and it's not like the Patriots absolutely dominate in Super Bowl experience compared to the Seattle Seahawks. But it is pretty interesting to see that 3 starters for the Patriots all already have been there, and 2 of them won a Super Bowl. And then you have a couple other guys like Mac Hollins, who also won a Super Bowl, but kind of is in somewhat more of a reserved role, since it's a little bit more of a rotating door depending on who has the big game in the pass catching room for New England, because Stephon Diggs is a 1,000-yard receiver, but Kayshon Bouttie's come up in a lot of big moments throughout the year. Mac Hollins did have the 31-yard catch against Denver last week and was a huge part of that, one of the few scoring drives in that game to eventually get the Patriots to get past the Denver Broncos in that one. Austin Hooper, that was his rookie year, and he had a couple of catches in that game, not necessarily the biggest. Now, if I do recall correctly, he did have a good game, but of course it wasn't enough for the Falcons to win because they blew the lead. For Seattle side, of course, Cooper Kupp, even though he's not as good as he used to be, he still has the smarts. He still has the experience and the intelligence to get open at points. So it is nice to see for Seattle side, as well as Sam Darnold, now that he has overcome his demons, has stopped seeing ghosts, him being the starting quarterback and kind of propelled himself to being one of the better quarterbacks over the last couple of years. That's also really nice to see. So New England has the more experience and has more players with Super Bowl experience, but it's pretty interesting to see how this plays out and who really can you rely on in these big moments. Is it going to be some of these guys that I've mentioned that will make big time plays for their teams to give them a chance to win? And then for X factors on each side, I'm going to look towards on offense and defense for each one of them. I'll start off with Seattle once again. For me, it's JSN. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is the X factor on offense. I know I talked about Kenneth Walker in the run game, but the versatility that JSN has. Initially, he was supposed to be just a slot receiver, but getting the mentorship from Cooper Kupp and the evolution of learning how to play at different roles and cross formations and still be really effective at every point has just shown how good JSN is. And it's crazy how often he gets open and how open he is, because it makes Sam Darnold's life a lot easier to throw to a much more open receiver compared to just trying to fit it in a pretty small window. So Jackson Smith-Njigba to me is the guy to look out for. We all know about him putting up over 1,700 yards in the regular season. But his versatility across the offense, whether it's playing at wide receiver or they line him up at running back to create even more mismatches, it gives them a bunch of opportunities to make sure that guys like Christian Gonzalez are not going to be able to really guard JSN and try and slow him down. I just see a bunch of opportunities throughout this ball game that Clint Kubiak and company are going to scheme extra opportunities and give so many ways for JSN to be an effective wide receiver in this ball game. For New England side, I'm going to go with Ramondre Stevenson. I brought it up earlier in the run game. I could very easily say Kayshon Boutte. I could go with one of these pass catchers, but I don't know who actually is going to step up in this game. I'm not going to rely on Stephon Diggs. You may see a cool catch from Kayshon Boutte. Perhaps you got a couple of clutch catches from Mac Hollins. But overall, in this receiving game, I don't know how much I can rely on it, especially since I don't know how much Drake May is actually going to be able to stay up because of this Seattle pass rush. That's something that really stands out to me. So I can't rely on any of the receivers, but I can rely on Ramondre Stevenson. He's going to be the bell cow back for New England on Sunday. He's going to have a great game to give New England a chance and potentially allow Drake May to make some big-time throws down the stretch if the Patriots were to win it. So to me, Ramondre Stevenson is the ultimate X factor in this game for New England on offense. Now for defense, once again, Nick Eamon-Warry, the way they've used him and the fact that he's been an absolute monster in the slot, whether he has to go against Stephon Diggs or ends up having to go against one of the tight ends if they want to go into more 12 or 22 personnel if New England does so. Them so often going into a 4-2-5 nickel formation, Seattle is. You could easily put Eamon-Warry in the box to try and bottle up the run game, or he guards the tight ends, which Drake May really likes throwing to. So Eamon-Warry on defense for me, for the Seahawks, ultimately stands out. I could go with any one of the pass rushers in defensive linemen, and I gave a lot of high praise to Ernest Jones, but I feel like the rookie out of South Carolina is going to make some big plays. He's going to get a lot of pass deflections. He's not going to be able to allow too many catches to his side, and even if they do get a catch on him, he's going to wrap up really quickly and not allow a breakaway run by any of these receivers. And then when it comes to the defensive X factor for the Patriots, I got to go Milton Williams. If you're going to slow down Kenneth Walker and not allow him to beat you on the inside, force him outside. Force Caleb on Chase on. Force Carlton Davis or Jalen Hawkins or any one of these defensive players for New England to make the tackle on the outside to where he can't break away. That's how you're going to get it done. Because if you're going to go up the middle, that's just going to be an absolute tear. Milton Williams has been the run stuffer that New England needed all season. He's been there, and I absolutely expect him to show up once again if they want to have a chance against a really good, well-rounded Seattle Seahawks team. And now that it's all said and done, I'm going to give you my game pick. I think this one's going to be relatively close. I know a lot of these playoff games have been decided by 3 points or less, and it very easily could be the case. However, I think Seattle is just a better team. I know it's not the hottest take, but I've got Seattle. I have the Seahawks getting revenge against a veteran coaching staff and getting their revenge from over a decade ago. Yes, if they get to the goal line, they will actually run the football. I will take Seattle to get it done. 27-22. That's going to do it for this edition of Cleats and Sneaks. Appreciate you tuning in to another edition of the show. We'll be back with more later on. But until then, go check out more of our channel. We've got other podcasts. We've got local content. LSU, Saints. We've got baseball coming up soon. We've got so much local content for you if you're in the Louisiana area and you love listening to ESPN Southwest Louisiana on our radio station. You can absolutely do so. Check out ESPN-SouthwestLouisiana.com and even check out our social media pages. But until then, appreciate all of you tuning in. We'll be back soon.